these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
For insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
We hold these truths.
with Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back, folks. Best podcast ever. And really cool guest with us today to talk about crime in D.C. Been in the headlines a lot lately. I even got a lot of questions about it in recent town halls, which I thought was odd since I live in Houston. But a lot of concerns about federal law enforcement takeover of D.C. What's really happening in D.C. Are the stats real? Is the crime real? And so, I was happy to give my take on that, just living here half the time. But today we have someone who actually studies the issue with us, Charles Fain Lehman. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So Charles is a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, senior editor of City Journal, focusing on the public policy of antisocial behavior, issues of crime, drugs, and public disorder. You've testified before the Senate, the House, the Commission on Civil Rights, all sorts of things. So, I mean, you study this for a living. You probably know a lot about this particular problem set than most. I kind of want to start from the beginning. One question I've had, and I don't think it matters a whole lot. It does and it doesn't. But there was all this dispute about whether the statistics were real. And then there was some allegations that even the city of D.C. had misreported statistics here and there. Again, the only reason I say it doesn't matter a whole lot is because, well, I've seen it. I've heard of countless issues mostly with our staff, not just our staff, but I mean member staff. One of my own staff members was held at gunpoint and robbed. And I see what I see right outside my house. So.
Yep. No, and that jives, I think, with how a lot of people experienced it. I think that there are different levels of not real involved in this discussion of crime statistics, and I'm always very wary of saying crime stats aren't real because invariably the political valence of that changes. 4 years ago, I was arguing with people on the left who said that the major surge in homicide was not real, and now I'm arguing with people on the right who say that the decline in homicide is not real. And what I say is the statistics are always an imperfect measure of reality, but they're usually at least reasonably correlated with reality, or measures from different angles give us different numbers. There are some questions about, there's an investigation into MPD. It seems like there was somebody on the force was falsifying some number of statistics in the local precincts. That's bad. It's a big problem. Yeah. I think the reality is the numbers in DC are both internally consistent and also consistent across with what's happening in other major cities. Yeah. So you're seeing similar trends in particularly the crimes that are hard to falsify: murder, carjacking, cases where there's really a strong incentive to get to the bottom of it and say this is a real body versus not. That leads me to conclude, do I believe that the level is 100% accurately measured? No, I don't think that's true of any public statistic ever. Do I think that the trend is generally accurate and there isn't any sort of great big cover-up? Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah, it's all relative, too. It's like, well, we've made a lot of progress since the 80s and 90s. It's like, yeah, but those are really, really bad days, man. Right. Like, that's not a great standard to hold ourselves to. And I think, I tend to agree with the White House's general message on this. It's like, this is our capital. It should be perfect. It's our capital, And for as much crap as DC gets, I still tell people, there's some magic to it, as long as you look at the right buildings. we have a lot of these classic Roman, Greek architecture buildings. We have the most beautiful capital in the world. I've been to a lot of capitals, and so far I'm still sticking with ours is the most beautiful, second to Texas. But Texas, we just have to. It's nice too.
I've been. It's a lovely state capital.
No, but ours is amazing. Like every detail of it, all the library, the Library of Congress, the Supreme Court. It's just there's a magic to it. And that magic will dissipate quickly if your car gets jacked. And that is a very real concern. I mean, I'll just anecdotally, so I live in a really spacious 485 square foot little place just on Garfield Park, which is just south of the Capitol.
Oh, yeah.
And I could walk maybe 12 minutes, so it's nice. Big park and summertime, tons of kids playing, like really family oriented, but it just has felt different even recently. So as crime statistics have apparently gone down, I'm telling you, like it feels different.
Yep.
Is, like, why are these two guys sitting by the playground where I take my 1-year-old daughter? What are they doing there?
Yep.
And why are they there for an hour? There's no reason. And why are these other guys on scooters who look like a scene from Clockwork Orange smoking cigarettes, like whizzing by everybody? So there's chaos and there's homicide, right? Like,
right.
Well,
And so
so
DC has a problem with both of these, and they're separate phenomena. I think this is a thing that gets lost.
That's
The first
antisocial behavior,
right.
like you talk
there's
about.
antisocial behavior, and what I would talk about is disorder, public disorder.
Yeah.
So, like, when we talk about crime statistics, invariably we mean major crimes, and what major crimes means is it really is what J. Edgar Hoover decided it meant in the 1930s when they first started collecting these statistics. It means murder, aggravated assault, robbery, burglary, larceny, theft, auto theft, technically arson, but nobody counts that one, a rape. So, those are the major crimes, and when we say a violent crime is going down, which means the sum of 4 of those is going up or down.
Yeah.
And so those figures often do not count the thing you're talking about, which is public disorder offending, which is the stuff that is often, A, bad in itself, causes a sense of unease, concern, fear, makes public places less livable.
The video I posted yesterday, where it's this guy dressed as, like, I think a baby. It was really weird.
Yeah.
And he's just doing cartwheels in front of a National Guard patrol. They just ignore him. They're very professional. They just walk right by him. But it's like normal people are dealing with that all the time.
Right.
I'm dealing with that on my kid's playground.
I've written about, I'm going to put this out here, I've written about public disorder, and it's hard to define disorder, but the phrase that I like to use is disorder is the domination of public spaces for private purposes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
when somebody comes in and says, this thing that we're all supposed to be sharing, actually it's mine.
Yes.
And that is disruptive to civic life, to urban life, right? Like the way that cities are not small towns, they're not small communities, they aren't tightly bound networks of trust. They rely on these sort of loose connections
Yeah.
where, like, that we can get along and it's cool and it's fine.
Yeah.
And disorder interrupts that, and as a result, it's also predicate to major
It's also
crime.
illegal, and it's
Yeah,
just
it's also
wrong.
illegal.
It's like this is public space. Have you seen the show Untamed with Eric Bana?
No.
It's pretty good. I think
Okay.
it's good. It's kind of sad. I mean, it's not kind of sad. It's super sad. But it's a good, like, crime series. And you're reminding me of it because there's a place in, like, I think they're park rangers in Yellowstone Park, and there's all these hippies or whatever that camp out in a certain area of it, and they're like, "This is our home." It's like, it's literally not. This is like literally where the Constitution does not protect you. This is public land. You just can't do that.
Right.
Like if you can do it, then anyone can do it. And then
sleep
you
on
have
the
chaos.
street. You can't shoot up on the street. And so one thing that has happened, and this does show up in the data, if you go dig into the people say this isn't an issue because they don't dig into the data. If you look, for example, at one of my favorite sources here is 311 calls for service to the city. If you look at sanitation cleanup calls from 2020 to today, they've gone up significantly in the District of
That's
Columbia.
interesting.
Yeah, and you can find other things.
So a sanitation call would be like, somebody pooped on the street.
Correct.
Someone come.
Yes,
I
or there
didn't
are
actually know
needles,
that I had a
or-
number I could call for that.
Yeah, 301. Or you can look at the city's annual point-in-time homelessness counts, where what you see is the number of homeless people overall is in decline. The number of unsheltered homeless people is up. And so what that tells you is that it's not about homelessness is not increasing in total, but rather the willingness of the marginal homeless person to just sort of hang out on the street as opposed to being in a shelter on the coldest night of the year has gone up. They're much more willing to be out and about. So many cities,
why? Because they can have tents
they
and
can have
like
tents
and like
that
houses.
are given to them
again, this
by
is
the
right.
city.
This is right by where I used to. And they moved it recently, thank God. But I was like, I have to walk my kid to the grocery store. Like, you think this isn't okay? Now they're not violent. They're not. They seem to keep.
but
to
they
themselves.
may be using, right?
But like, it's just not. That's not. Well, I can't pitch a tent wherever I want.
You can't pitch it wherever you want. But then there are also, there are what I think about as diseconomies of scale to disorder. That's the very highfalutin way of saying one guy in a tent is, like, inconvenient and he gets in your way and it's unpleasant. 3 guys in a tent, now they might work together. 5 guys in a tent, now you have a target market. Somebody shows up to start dealing to them. Maybe somebody starts selling sex there. All of a sudden that grows. You get, and so disorder breeds that kind of
breeds
dysfunction.
disorder, and
it makes the city. What was your once orderly public space is given over to disorderly behavior.
I had Michael Schellenberger on, and he did that book, San Francisco.
Yeah, great book.
He's mostly an environmentalist guy, but he did an interesting deep dive into that. I don't know what you think about it. just based on my quick reading of both of you, I think you generally agree.
Yeah, more or less, I think it's right.
But one interesting point he made was like, look, a family who just loses their job doesn't end up on Skid Row.
Correct.
That's not how you end up on Skid Row. Literally, there are places for them to sleep in San Francisco, indoors, in a shelter, and they refuse to go because it's a block further from their dealer.
Right. And you're not allowed to use it in the shelter, or you don't have access. Right. So in homelessness politics and policy, we talk about you can think about two different categories of homeless people. There are people who are transiently homeless and people who are chronically homeless. People who are transiently homeless have real problems, like they get evicted, maybe dysfunctional
very
behavior,
bad luck.
Yeah, bad luck. They don't know how to pay their bills. Maybe they're not very functional, but like you can solve their problem basically by rapid rehousing, which is like good policy that works. The chronically homeless. So HUD's definition of chronic homelessness is homeless for.
Say it slower.
The housing chronic homelessness.
Okay. As
defined by the Department of Housing and Urban Development is, I'm going to get the period wrong, but I think it's homelessness over the past year. The relevant factor is including a substance use disorder, serious mental illness, or other co-occurrent disability.
Yeah.
And what they're describing there is like the people that most people think about when they think about the homeless. It's not the invisible
It's
majority.
not the dad who just lost his job and needs to like sleep in his car with his
Correct.
kids. Like they'll figure there's systems for them to get back on their feet.
And the chronically homeless population is a relatively small share of the overall homeless population as you sort of count them officially, but they take up the majority of the resources. They are the hard cases. Right. And that's when you're talking. So when you're
because
talking
that's what you see. That's they won't go anywhere.
Precisely. And many cities in the United States over the past 5 years have really sort of lost control of disorder as a problem. That includes homelessness, it includes public drug use, it includes graffiti. It's something simple as like the guy who plays his music on his phone in the subway. Like you've had this experience on the metro. Like the guy who will blare his music. That's disorderly behavior. Just to be
that guy.
Well,
and it's the more they can get away with it, the more they'll do it, especially teenagers. And like that's what I'm seeing in D.C. It's like these little packs of teenagers. In New York, I think they have the same issue. It's not something I see in Houston. Houston's so spread out; it's kind of hard to.
Right. Houston mitigates this by being a much more car-centric, much less walkable environment. With pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
But you remove the number of, you reduce the number of public spaces.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, we got crime problems, but and we'll get into like what those can be blamed on, and it's not the cops. The cops just eventually. This sounds like I'm blaming them, and I'm really not. It's like they refuse to eventually do their jobs because they know that when they arrest somebody, it's a waste of their time.
Yeah. Because
the judge is going to let them go on a conscious bail. We just made that illegal in Texas. So I want to actually. Okay. Let's get to homelessness.
I do want to talk about. I do also want to talk about the other problem in D.C. very briefly, which is serious violent crime, which I think is where the criticisms of the White House have been.
Yeah, and that's what I want to get to.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
what are we doing right now? So, what is the White House doing? That's what we're getting to here.
Right. Well, so what they've done is over the past, I think we're 3 weeks at this point, is deploy federal resources into the district. It means National Guard, but it also means federal law enforcement, DEA, FBI. I did a ride along in Southeast Anacostia, which is informative, and we actually didn't run across we didn't run across any federal officers until the very end. We came back to the station and there were like 30 guys who were about to go out. So I was like, I missed everybody. HSI, all those different guys. And, I think the argument is DC has a long-term and durable violent crime problem, right? The statistic I like to point to is young black men in D.C. have a death rate on par with Americans serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like it's 3.5 out of every 1,000 young black men between the ages of 15 and 24 will die in any given year.
Wow.
That's about 3.5 times the national figure, and that's all concentrated. There are like 10 blocks in the District of Columbia that are home to 14% of homicides. I think it's 57% of homicides happen just in Wards 7 and 8 over the river. Wow. So in addition to that disorder problem, you also have a deeply
I went for a run over there once and immediately regretted it.
There were, like any high crime area, there are nice parts and there are challenging parts. It's highly concentrated.
Yeah.
No, but DC has, in addition to this recently developed and real public disorder problem, it also has a really deeply entrenched violent crime problem that literally goes back to the 80s and the 70s. There's a beef from the crack era that is still relevant today.
Yeah,
in DC.
it's a very passionate city.
It's a very passionate city.
It's different than Houston. I mean, Houston has gangs, gang feuds, and it's also very concentrated. Most cities, I think that's true.
Yeah,
I think you can say like people are like Chicago's a war zone. It's like, well, it depends on where you are. Depends on where you are.
There's something in criminology. It's called the iron law of crime concentration, which is 10% of the blocks, like city blocks in any city, will be home to about 50% of the crime.
So why in DC? I understand. I grew up in Houston. There's a gang problem, right? It's just part of the culture. What is it in DC? Is it also gangs? I mean,
but gang is sort of a misnomer.
Let's define gangs.
Yeah,
like being a criminologist. Do you call yourself a criminologist?
I call myself a policy analyst. Criminologists are crazy.
Okay, criminologist.
I can get into criminology. Criminology is half very interesting, sane, smart people, and half sociologists who are lunatics. And are like, crime is a social construct, and the government really commits all the crimes.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of criminology.
Yeah, no, they're not great.
Crazy. That sounds like a liberal judge.
So gangs is an. Here's a too broad claim. Gangs don't mean the same thing that they did historically, which is to say there used to be very large-scale gang infrastructure in the United States.
You could name them.
Yeah.
They had signs. There was colors.
National level Bloods and Crips. We rolled those guys, right? We regard those guys.
Yeah.
They're all in federal prison and will be for the rest of their lives if they're still alive. And that sort of durable national infrastructure isn't durable because it collides with law enforcement too easily.
Mm-hmm.
So really what a gang is today is it's you and your bros, and like you're often part of a broader citywide infrastructure, but it's just like, you and your block, and you hang together and you beef with the guys on the other side of the block, and the things that you fight over are not necessarily like drug corners, because the Mexicans control that, and the Hondurans control that, and like they aren't really letting. They've taken those jobs away from hardworking native-born Americans and given them to immigrants. For pros and cons to that strategy, it's arguably made it's arguably made the drug markets less violent, but that's a whole other conversation. Often.
But it makes other things maybe more violent because now they don't have a way to make money, and who knows? I don't know.
The way that I like to summarize it is how does violence happen? Violence is what happens when you have young men with guns, low social control, and some source of beef. Right. Where beef is often like not big fighting things. It's like, you looked at my girl wrong.
Right. This and I was gonna say this very pathological honor code.
Yes.
Like it's crazy.
There's a great book by Elijah Anderson called Code of the Street, which is a good work of sociology about culture in Philadelphia in the 90s, which is about exactly this dynamic of how honor culture works among mostly young black men in poor Philadelphia. And you see, the core factors again are just like, you need young men, and they need to have the means to kill each other, and
not much to lose.
Not much to lose. Yeah,
I would have this conversation with my SEALs in San Diego. I mean, just like any city, there's a bunch of guys who are out who have nothing to lose, and I always tell them, like, just because you can win doesn't mean you should try, because you will get in trouble. And they won't.
Yeah.
And they will escalate to an extent that you didn't expect, because they will kill you.
They care about status.
They just don't care. They're nuts.
Well, and because status matters tremendously, because you don't have an institution that mediates status or that assigns status other than the guy who's playing his music in the car. Sorry, in the train car. Yeah. He's establishing status. He's like, you all have to do what I want. Yes, exactly. Yeah. But then the other thing, when you talk about nothing to lose, the language I would use is there's a lack of social control. Yeah. They aren't exposed to formal or informal institutions, family, church, jobs, probation and parole, the police, that are stopping them from acting. Yeah. But then also, the beef is like, I put a rap video on TikTok in which I call you out, and then you roll up and kill me. And this has resulted in the death of millionaire rappers in America.
Yeah, that's the story of. back in the 90s at least. I mean, geez.
Right.
It's wild.
Tupac and Biggie.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So when you talk about D.C., a lot of what's going on is just there's a great study that the city commissioned which shows that 60 to 70% of the gun violence in the city is attributable to between 200 and 500 individuals at any one time.
And I've seen that statistic in a lot of cities.
Yes, it's true. It's true all over the place.
concentrated.
In Chicago, there's a guy named Andrew Papachristos at Northwestern who's done this work. It's like, I think, 1,000 individuals are responsible for, I forget the fraction, but something like 40% of the violence.
Right.
Houston, I'm sure it's true. New York, it's certainly true. And the answer is, like, in most places, that combination of problems does not exist. You don't have young men with guns, low social control, and beef. But when it does exist, it goes really badly. And DC has had that problem durably for a really long time. And the city has... It's actually not true the city has lacked the will to root it out. 20 years ago, they did something that looked a lot like what's happening now, except it was sort of more... it was more bilateral, but there was a local federal takedown initiative that was focused on, it was called focused deterrence, which is policy wonk for focusing on the guys who are the problem and locking them up, and it notably reduced homicide in the city of DC. Like, it had a real impact.
Yeah, that's how it works. So there's a methodology. Navy Yard used to be the absolute worst of the worst. I mean, I remember coming here years and years ago, and there was cops everywhere. There was chases. I was like, I had to drive through it for some reason to actually get to the base. Like, it's why it's called Navy Yard. And of course now it's gentrified. Is it safer? Sort of. It's still there's a bunch of young people living there that are basically targets for criminals. But what do you think about just generally what the federal involvement?
Yeah.
Let's get into the legality of it. People are like, "This is legal. You can't do this." I'm like, "Well, it's a federal city." I mean, So
it seems from a legal perspective they're on pretty sure footing, right? I mean, like, DC is a creature of Congress. Congress has plenary power here, and Congress in the Home Rule Charter said, yes, you can do this. So it seems pretty clearly like the president can do this. I think there are big questions about whether he can send people into Chicago. I don't have a strong opinion on the legalities there. Which
I don't think we know what the plan is.
It's
I hate
really
getting
not
questions
obvious
about it because I'm like, tell me the plan, and I suppose I could have an opinion, but my general opinion is on the hierarchy of needs, safety is first, and so I'm sorry for the 1% of people that get caught up in it, but I think the 99% who aren't the criminals might be pretty happy. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is.
Right. That's the core question. But talking to DC, look, it seems to me like they're not going to have a legal problem. B, it really does seem like crime has declined. This to me was the big question.
Yeah, massively.
Yeah, I mean, this was the big question to me going in.
The Democrat mayor's like, maybe this is a good idea.
Right.
Now we're seeing some big turnarounds.
And I wrote about this shortly after this happened, where I said, okay, look, this could work if they really focus on the issues. There was some reportage, the implication which was they're just having the National Guard stand around and do nothing. Yeah. To me, the interesting question now is how durable is this? And can they transition to a more durable arrangement where it's, once boots are off the ground, are things going to bounce right back? And how do you prevent that from happening? But yeah, it's gone pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah, durability is definitely a question. I don't know how many federal agents are here, and, they have other jobs,
right?
Obviously,
like you want DEA doing things other than this. You want FBI doing things other things than this. If the president wants to implement his immigration agenda, he needs HSI doing their job.
Yeah, but again, I don't know how many are here. I just don't know. But we can definitely agree it's had an effect. I mean, in the end, though, what's the real problem? I mentioned cashless bail, or just this bail reform generally. This is certainly our problem in Houston since 2018. We had, massive. We elect judges in Texas, like one of 5 states that does that. Pros and cons to that. But the cons are, I think you could elect somebody who's a car washer for a living and never had a legal background, and technically could be a judge all of a sudden. And that resulted in, I think the stats we have, and since 2018, probably 900 people out on bail who are accused of murder. That's a lot of people accused of murder who are just out on the streets, and then you wonder why you have a bad homicide rate. We have a generally understaffed police force in Houston compared to the size of our city. So, and the cops will tell you straight up, like, okay, we can arrest them, and then they'll be out. So like, why am I doing all that work and paperwork to put myself at risk? But I got to get back home to my family, and this judge or DA just isn't going to do their jobs. It's not a good situation. What do you think Trump's executive order on that?
On cash bail?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my answer to this is, I think it is in many ways too blunt of an instrument for a real problem, which is to say, when you say cash bail versus cashless bail, my response is, well, what's the alternative? There are some jurisdictions, so I think I spent a lot of time on New York's bail reform, which is sort of infamous. And New York basically said you can't impose cash bail except for a handful of serious violent offenses.
Let's define both, actually, for the audience.
Which one? Cash bail?
Both.
Yeah.
I mean, because my understanding is cash bail means you have to have the cash.
Yes.
Whether that you have to have the money there.
Yeah.
Cashless means you can borrow it.
So let me.
Am I right?
No, it means they can't require you to put up a bond. Okay.
Oh, so it's like no bond. It's a $0.
Let me take this all the way back to. I've been arrested for a crime. I go before
what crime
a judge.
Were you arrested for?
I don't want to say on air. I've been arrested for, I don't know, public indecency. And I go before a judge, and I get a bail hearing, and it's the question is, I'm going to be on trial. I have not yet been convicted. Can I be held before trial? Right. So there are two legitimate reasons to hold someone before trial. One is that he's a flight risk. He might flee the jurisdiction. The other one is that he's a reoffense risk. Parenthetically, in New York State, you can only do flight risk. You cannot do the reoffense risk, which is a major source of New York's problems. It's crazy.
That's the most insane.
It's the only state in the union where it's true. It's insane.
That's insane.
It's correct.
So you be like, let's forget public indecency. Let's talk about like domestic violence.
Yes, you cannot.
This guy beat his baby.
You cannot remand.
He might do it again. That doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter if he's going to do it again.
You cannot consider dangerousness in the state of New York.
I mean, some of my best friends are New York City cops, and it's just like
it's insane.
They feel so demoralized, in these last few years. It's hell.
Okay, but so one thing that you can do is say you can set bail, which is you have to put up a surety you have to give me a certain amount of cash. Really what you have to do is pay the bail bondsman, and then he puts up the cash, and then he'll get the cash back to ensure that you show up, right? It's just if you don't show up, you forfeit.
Yeah.
So cashless bail removes that component. And the argument is basically there's not necessarily a strong association between the things that we actually want to stop, which is flight risk and reoffense risk, and ability to put up some money, which is, in my view, not an unreasonable argument. The problem comes in when you say, okay, what's the alternative? So what some states have done is basically to say, we're not ever going to impose cashless bail. We're not ever going to impose cash bail. We're going to allow judges to sometimes set non-monetary restrictions. You have to call a phone number sometimes, or you have to wear an ankle monitor that you probably know how to break out of, or you have to go to see court services.
How do you break out of one? In case I wanted to know, I'm just curious. Don't you? Know.
There are guys who know. This is an extant industry.
Do you know a guy who knows?
I probably know people who know people who know. No, so you impose these less restrictive means regardless of the severity of the offense. That's one approach. Another approach to cashless bail is to say, okay, rather than remanding people on the basis of whether or not they're able to pay, we'll say, we'll use it's called algorithmic bail, where you look at your history of criminal offending, you look at how many open cases you have, you look at other indicators of behavior, like if you're on parole or probation, and you say, does this predict that you're likely to reoffend? You plug that all into a formula, and it spits out a number. The judge says, I think you're likely to reoffend, I'm going to detain you, or you're not likely to reoffend, I'm not going to detain you.
Well, I mean, all of this seems perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
Devil's in the details, right? You can't just be like bail or no bail.
Right.
But
there are jurisdictions that are just saying no bail, and that's a real problem.
And I think that's what Trump's executive order is at least trying to get at. And we passed, again, I'm not a Texas state legislator, but we did pass a bill in this session that you might know more about actually than I would. Basically, no more cashless bails.
Yeah.
And because we view that as just the major problem in places like Harris County, where Houston is. I mean, I think that makes sense. And I'm sure there's more to the bill than that. I don't think it's a one sentence bill. I'm sure there's a lot of details to it that get into those nuances, right? But
to my top line takeaway is it's okay to move past cashless bail, to move past cash bail. It's okay to use a different method for deciding who gets detained and who doesn't. You just have to use a method that makes sense, and a lot of states don't use any method at all.
There's
and
none.
that's a
Just
huge
letting them all
problem.
go, and we're
Right.
doing it in Houston, and
Right.
and people even in Texas, deep red Texas. It's still we still have this kind of thing called local control.
And-
now we got a new mayor. The first thing the new mayor did was go on a beat with the police. I mean, that's great. But we also have a really crazy new DA, who primaried the old Democrat DA because she was too hard on crime.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in crazy town.
I mean, you're
like, and that guy won. I mean, it's not good. So I mean, what do we do, right? It's I still think bail reform. Speaking to law enforcement all the time, it's like, what does law enforcement need? Well, they need more of them. They need more training. There's a lot of things they need,
That to me is the
and they
biggest
can't
thing.
get more training if they're always working. It's not like the military where we go in cycles. See, they're always on deployment. I give it to law enforcement all the time. Like I'll make fun of Army guys all day long, especially special forces and Rangers for good reason. But I'm just kidding. But I'm not kidding. I do make fun of them, but they're my bros. I still love them. But I will never make fun of cops because that is just like even if they know I'm joking, like they just have the hardest job. I'm sorry, but they do. And you're on deployment all the time, and like that dead person you see is somebody from your community. It's not like us overseas. I see whatever. It's like. And we kind of signed up for it. Like, it's just different. I mean, we signed up for war. They signed up to protect their community, and you're seeing the worst possible things. Like I just used the example before of a parent beating a child. Like, you see stuff like that all the time. I talk to my cop friends. It's just I can't even. I don't even know how they sleep. I don't even know how they get through anything.
a lot of dark humor. No, I mean, I think
for us too, it's a lot of dark humor.
No, I mean, I think, look, the number one priority for me in terms of crime control in D.C., in the nation as a whole, is that we don't have enough cops, and we also don't deal with them well. We talk about the decline in big city policing since 2020, and that's maybe hit the bottom, but it's still an issue. But if you go look at the numbers, by most available measures, the ratio of police officers to the population has been declining since the Great Recession.
Yeah,
like it's been downhill since 2009.
And it's not like, I mean, it's a lack of recruiting. I mean, these days, luckily the defund the police movement's gone on the downside a little bit, but the police are still telling me the same problems. Like, who wants to be a cop? Like.
And I look, there are a bunch of different problems. One is the attitude. Luckily, that's, I think, gotten a little better.
A little better.
There's still cities where it's a huge problem, and those cities have bounced back less. You go to Seattle or Portland, you still have a problem. But it is also just sort of very practical stuff like, when people ask me what the silver bullet is, I say police officer retention, and then their eyes glaze over and they just fall asleep. But it is actually extraordinarily important.
Yeah.
If for no other
you
reason,
need experienced police still on the beat.
Experienced police. We actually have high quality evidence from Chicago. Experienced police both use force less and also reduce crime more.
Yeah.
So they both are less prone to doing bad things and also prevent more bad things. It's a win-win. But a lot of people don't want to. Yeah, a lot of people don't want to stay in. They say, I'm going to be in for a couple of years. I'll get out and do something else. It is harder and harder in the modern economy to retain people in any public sector work, particularly sort of blue collar public sector work. I think partially this is good because it's because people are moving up to other roles, but the downside is it's really hard to keep people in policing, and there's not enough money to be spent on keeping people in policing, and you lose the manpower as a result of that. And one of the few things that we have learned in academic criminology that academic criminology has told us is that cops reduce crime, which is obvious when you say it, but it was unclear in the literature for several decades.
Yes,
but
yes. I know exactly which studies you're talking about.
Yeah,
it's wow, what a crazy correlation.
Right, but we actually know very little about how to prevent crime. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't work, and this does.
But that's kind of why it's working in DC, right? It's just there's just more people walking around. There's a deterrence effect.
Correct.
So even if you can they're just walking around, it's they're just walking around. Good. Because a guy with a gun and a camouflage uniform, I don't know, it just kind of makes you not want to act like an idiot. Whereas before, you didn't care. and it works. Can it work forever? I don't know. I think, again, that's where we get into like the more complicated conversations about let's keep the bad guys in jail once the police actually arrest them, and have a good system for that. Can I go back to jump around a little bit back to homelessness, because there is the White House is also implementing like a homelessness order as well, and so this gets to the maybe map out for us the debate between like housing first, what we would call housing first as a policy model versus
housing earned.
Housing what?
We talking about housing earned, probably.
I don't know.
There are a couple of
Like, what's the
variations,
opposite of housing first? I don't know.
Housing first, or housing earned, or treatment first, or
Right.
services first.
Yeah. I think the other model would be, right, you still put them in some kind of shelter, but you have to be putting them through a program. Otherwise, it is a total waste of resources. Otherwise, you're Gavin Newsom spending what was it? What's the number? $26 billion to basically get nothing done.
Right. I mean, so the premise of housing, housing first was briefly a bipartisan consensus, right? It's a W. Bush administration HUD initiative to sort of see it as national policy. They moved beyond it in places like Utah since then. The housing first idea was, what is homelessness? Homelessness is when you don't have a home. If you put people in homes, they will no longer be homeless. And that is actually mechanically true. And it turns out in the studies of housing first that people who go into housing first are more likely to be in houses 5 years later versus people who don't. That's true.
But what's the cost benefit?
What's the cost benefit? And also, do you address any of the other underlying pathologies? Because part of the argument was, why are homeless people dysfunctional? It's because they don't have a home. And it turns out that actually they don't have a home because they're dysfunctional in many situations. Yeah. And so if you don't, when you talk about housing earned or services first, what you're saying is, for that chronically homeless population that we were just talking about, for the people who are seriously mentally ill, are addicted to drugs, the type of substance use disorder, who have some other disability, that dysfunctional behavior is contributing to the harm that they do to themselves and to everyone else around them. And if you want to sort of have a holistic theory of addressing the pathology, then you need to do more than just give them a house. You need to get them to services. Sometimes you need to coerce them into services. You need to get them clean. You need to get them a job. You need to do all these things that we thought Housing First would do, and it just didn't.
Yeah.
So I think, where the White House is trying to go in fits and starts is, how can we shift towards more of that services first model? How can we deal with the holistic problem? And also separately, how can we deal with public disorder on the street? Because that is a serious issue.
Okay, so then that's the general idea of homeless or home first versus, or housing first versus sort of housing first with treatment.
Housing earned, yeah.
Whether you coerce it or not, and a bunch of models. I'm not clear. What are we trying to do in D.C., or is it clear yet?
I mean, I think it's not totally clear. I think there are many different moving parts. I think that what would be good to move is to say, look, there's a spectrum of readiness, and you want to get people into a place where they are self-sustaining, where they're employed, where they pay for their own housing, maybe with some Section 8 support or whatever, but they are providing for themselves. They're no longer addicted to drugs or seriously mentally ill. They're able to take care of themselves, or they're in a setting where they're able to they're able to be in a state where they can care for themselves. What does that look like? There's trying to shift people into treatment, whether that's ensuring that people take psychiatric medication or ensuring that people go into drug treatment so they can kick whatever habit they have. That can be voluntary. It's not always voluntary. Yeah. Sometimes it's inpatient. Sometimes it's outpatient. There's been a huge fight in New York about involuntary commitment for people who are addicted to drugs, and it really does work.
Of course, I mean, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out, and we got rid of all of our state institutions.
Yeah.
I mean, does that have a lot to do with this problem?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we have denuded our ability to institutionalize people, and some of that's about the deinstitutionalization movement in the 60s. Some of it is as simple as the IMD exception, which is institutions of mental disease. Medicaid will not reimburse states for treatment in an insane asylum, in a facility for treatment of mental disease over 16 beds. And so states have closed those down because they shift seriously mentally ill people into conventional hospitals because they can bill the feds for that, and they can't bill the feds for institutional care. So that's that is one very practical reason that happened. I think that ideally, though, you have a spectrum of care, right? Many people who are seriously mentally ill don't need long-term institutional care. They might need short-term institutional care to stabilize, or they may need what's called assisted outpatient treatment, which is where you are on the street in the community, but you have routine check-ins to ensure that you are properly medicated. Many people with schizophrenia, certain kinds of bipolar disorder, other serious psychiatric illnesses can live functional lives if they are properly medicated, but medication compliance is hard. That's actually a feature of the illness in some cases. And if you just leave people alone to be dysfunctional, they will be dysfunctional. That will happen. And they may need that infrastructure to be imposed on them. I think where we have been in recent years in many big blue cities, in part, is there's a reticence to impose that infrastructure on them. There's a reticence to say, you need help and we're going to give it to you whether you want it or not. I think that is where the administration would like to go. And the administration, I think, also would like to go in the direction of, it is not incumbent on us to tolerate public disorder just because the disorder is downstream of something that is only kind of or not really your fault. Yes, the person is seriously mentally ill and he needs help, but that's actually not a reason to let him defecate on the street.
Right.
That's a reason to help him.
Which I totally agree with. I hear that argument a lot, and I'm like, I get it. You got a pathological sense of compassion. And I do call it a pathological sense of compassion because it's unreasonable compassion. No, you have to understand that the background, it's like, that's great, but we got to solve the problem right now. And what you're really saying is you're looking for an excuse to take no action and do nothing and not solve the problem. And I'm sorry, but it's kind of like the immigration debate. It's like, well, we have to solve the root of the problem, which is the situations in Honduras. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Or you could build a wall. It's actually really hard to climb over a wall.
Yeah, I mean, guys, come on. I mean, it's always that's always where these political debates go, and I've seen it so many times. But yeah, you do have to do both. I mean, what you're describing it's really hard. I mean, you're right because it has to be tailored to that person, but also scalable.
Yep.
Has any place figured this out really well?
I like a lot what they're trying to do in Utah, actually, of all places, and they've been trying to build out. They're talking about the know by name system, but one of the barriers to this is that services are not well integrated. Again, this is a really dry technical topic, but it is important. Which is like, you have people who are the term you talk about high utilizers, people who are cycling through a lot of different public services. They go to jail, they go to the hospital, they go to the ER, they go to the shelter, they're back on the street, then they cycle again. One of the things that Utah has tried to do is follow people across services, have a unified ID number. And that sounds, again, like very dry and technical. What they're doing is they're going from points of contact with the system to being aware at a technological and comprehensive level across the system where the person is. And, that's about like how service providers see people. Often what happens is that people just sort of fall through the cracks of that poorly knitted together service provision system. Their goal is to say, okay, we're not just gonna say this is your imperative coming from one agency. All the agencies are gonna have a unified system for working together on this. Yeah. And they're early days on this, but I think it is a better model, and it's a model that again, my view is not somebody who's seriously mentally ill, somebody who's addicted to drugs needs to be in prison forever because that's not a good use of a prison cell. But they do need to stop it.
They need a place.
They need a place.
I think we did something like this in Texas for a little while. Like the governor kind of went into Austin. But I don't know the details, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But it was what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And every expert I've talked to says more or less the same thing. You have a place to put them. That's not exactly housing first. It's just because housing first implies, look, just give them a house, everything will be fine. Obviously, That's not true. The underlying conditions are still the underlying conditions. I think there has to be some form of coercion, right? I just think there does. And
I think it needs to be a tool that's available.
Yeah, and there has to be a place to go and resources there. It's expensive, but at least we're already spending a crap ton of money on this. I mean, you got to at least do it right.
Yeah,
if you're going to do it.
And, in many senses, that is the population. Those are the people among the populations of people who it's sort of easiest to justify spending public money on. You talk about like children, the elderly, the disabled, the infirm, people who are seriously mentally ill. Like they cannot care for themselves, and they need someone to care for them. And it's actually not.
And people like it when their downtown doesn't look like that.
And people like when
anymore.
the downtown doesn't, is not covered in tents and people using drugs.
They want to be able to walk around.
I don't want to step over needles on the street.
We're changing. We're just going to go for a few other like random crime subjects. If you don't mind, hate crimes. What's
I hate crime.
there was obviously this recent mass shooting in Minneapolis. It's being investigated as a hate crime against Christians. The term hate crime is an interesting one to begin with. In the end, you killed kids, so you should just either get the death penalty or go to jail forever, like either one. Whether it's a hate crime or not. But I actually want to get your perspective on the phenomena of these mass shootings. Now, there's the stats out there that say there's hundreds, thousands of mass shootings every year because of the way it's defined is like 4 or more people shot. I think that's we're way oversimplifying what the American public actually thinks of as a mass shooting, which is really more like what happened in Minneapolis, where you have this truly insane person. It's a terrorist attack. It's much more like a terrorist attack. On a vulnerable population. For some reason, they like schools. Could be a truck driving through a bunch of people. It could be a gun. Whatever the case is, there's a desire for mass casualties based on some crazy personal ideology. So I'm curious, and now you're really narrowing it down to much fewer people. I've seen some studies. I'm curious if these are, if I'm just hearing this on the internet or if it's true, that a lot of them are drug users, fatherless. All of these things are correlated between most of these shooters. Obviously, young males tend to be the perpetrator. The other thing I notice, and I tell people, I'm like, this is also a copycat crime. This is a copycat crime ever since Columbine.
Correct.
We never had this since Columbine. And it opened up this entire world for crazy young men who don't have a life and probably can't get a girlfriend to engage in this ultra-violent behavior. Like, that's the theory I tell people. I don't have a better theory than that.
To me, I think that is, I can't speculate rigorously on the sort of root causes stuff. Certainly plausible. It's hard to say consistently because you point what's a mass shooting, mass casualty event, or whatever you want to call it. What's terrorist?
But it's these theatric events.
Exactly.
Let's call them like theatric terrorist events. They're very specific types.
I think about, there's a great book by, his name, I think it's Ethan Waters. It's called Crazy Like Us, which is about the cultural contingency of expressions of mental illness. And what he looks at is 3 or 4 case studies of cultures that do not have a native concept of. So, like, he writes about, I think, anorexia in East Asia. And anorexia in East Asia was, like, brought there by Americans. Like, they did not have the relevant concept of anorexia. And someone was like, have you considered being anorexic? Or describe the concept of anorexia. And then it sort of spread as a contagious meme in East Asia. The other example of this is suicide. You're talking about suicide clusters, where like one kid in high school commits suicide, and you get a burst of them.
Interesting.
So that idea is contagious
as well,
right? Yeah, no, I mean absolutely. You can see this in the national prevalence estimates. You can see it in school-based studies where there are more people in the cluster than there ought to be.
Right.
For transgender identification. Where there is clearly a way of, many people have struggles in their lives. There are many people who are fatherless, many people who deal with drugs, etc. How do you cognize how to act on that is in part culturally contingent. And so I think, yes, I absolutely agree that in many senses the sort of specter of Columbine, of these sort of mass shootings, and you look at the most recent set of shooters, they almost, idolize or worship prior mass shooters. They, the Columbine guys, the Emmanuel AME Church shooter, the New Christ shooter. They like see themselves as part of a lineage of these guys. Yeah. I do see this as connected though to somebody like Luigi Mangione, the shooter in New York, who murdered Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO, where there is this really dark undercurrent in online discourse that is just like, yes, it was good that he did that because the healthcare CEOs are evil and they're trying to kill people and it's all horrible and awful.
It's pretty disgusting. Like,
Yeah.
the reaction to that. I mean, it's like, especially if you actually look into that particular guy's life, like he didn't come from money.
Yeah.
The shooter did.
Yeah.
You know, this other guy built up his whole life and became a CEO. I mean, it's just he lived, the American dream really. It was and that idolization, and the same happened. I remember the Rolling Stone cover of the Boston bomber. It's
Right.
Like, what are you guys doing?
Unbelievable. Yeah, and but even something as simple as the true crime fascination. I think that there was a poor side to that. The sort of fixation on serial killers. Do I think it is actively endorsing or inciting this activity in a way that some people who are pro Luigi Mangione are? No. Do I think that it is contributing to this cultural concept? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, and I'm alarmed by it.
Do people play video games a lot because they're more and more realistic, kind of desensitized?
It's hard to say.
What do you think?
I mean, I tend to think about video games as sort of the opposite, which is that they're
They're an outlet.
Yeah, well, they're an out. Not even that they're an outlet that they chill you out too much. They're a downer. They're a depressant. That the problem with video games is that people sit on their couch and play video games all the time, rather than that it's encouraging them to get up and be active. I kind of wish it did.
Yeah,
but not like that. But
that's true. I mean, there's definitely a correlation between the heightened use of video games and kids are drinking less, they're socializing less. Social media has a lot to do with this too. So, yeah, but that could be a cause, right? If you're not well socialized, what do you become? Antisocial. And get crazy ideologies.
And when you talk about meta-contagion, nothing has supercharged that more than the internet, right? I can go online right now and watch the video footage from Columbine. I couldn't do that 20 years ago.
And you can find other people who are just as crazy as you, and it helps normalize and affirm those what are actually very fringe beliefs, but it helps you believe that they're really not. It's like you really found your people, and like And that problem manifests in all sorts of ways, not just, of course, shooters, but in crazy conspiracies, and they got the flat earthers and 9/11 truthers. Just pick your conspiracy.
I still respect the flat earthers because they're committed to they're really committed to the crazy.
They are committed. There's a hilarious documentary. A journalist kind of embedded with some of them, and. It's just one part of it I really remember because he was this journalist reporting on it was like watching them set up this experiment. And the experiment was that he's like, this is actually a really good experiment because it would shoot a laser, I don't know, like 3 or 4 miles away. And the idea is that if the Earth is flat, then the laser would hit the exact same height on the target, same height. But if the Earth is not flat, then the laser should, in theory, hit a little bit higher. And they set it up, apparently, I guess, really well. And lo and behold, it shows the laser, the target hits higher, which means the Earth is round.
Right.
So then they were just all trying to figure out what went wrong with the experiment. And the journalist reporting on it's like, I don't even know what to say about this. This is nuts. They literally proved themselves wrong, but they won't believe it.
Sounds right.
Yeah. What else are we missing? We're about at the hour, but any last words?
Oh gosh, I feel like scratch that. How do we fix this crime? Oh gosh, hire more cops.
Is it part of the human condition?
Well, here's what I would say, and this is a thesis I've been kicking around for a while. Is 2 things are true. One is that, in some senses, we figured out how to fix crime. In the 90s, we discovered that a combination of more cops and strategic enforcement and more incarceration can dramatically reduce crime rates.
Yeah.
And this is not the 70s. We actually do know how to do it. And often what has happened in our major cities is that they have either forgotten about it, or they've forgotten about the lessons of the 90s, or they have an ideological opposition to it.
There's a social justice element to it where it's like, it's unfair to lock them up because X, Y, and Z.
It's racist and mean and bad and whatever. And then the second point is that arrangement is in some senses very delicate. It's very fragile because it is sort of built on top of many prior institutions that used to control crime, that used to sort of keep that informal social control, that have withered away. And so, I'm increasingly aware of what is the lost cultural and legal infrastructure that made community social control possible. Is there a way to restore it? I'm not sure, but I think there's a whole sort of history there that is worth excavating because we did have better methods for sort of informally controlling crime than we do today, and there's some question about recovering it.
Interesting discussion, and
Look at that.
I'll be waiting to see what happens in D.C. over the next few weeks.
It'll be
months.
interesting.
And so far I like it though. Thanks, Charles.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you.
being here.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it. It's good talk.